All right, I am working in Adobe Illustrator CC 2018 again here. And what I am going to do is I'm going to show you something that's fairly complex. Whenever I work on a logo, I always try to sketch things out. I usually start first with thumbnails. Those are very small, just ideas that are put out on paper. Just, you're going through as fast as you can, and you are thinking about it, but you're not getting into all the details. You just want to get the basic concept out. So with thumbnail sketches, they are very small. Sometimes they're as small as the size of maybe a $50 coin, somewhere in there. They could also be a little bit larger. It really just depends on, how many I want to put on a sheet and just how fast things are going. In this lesson, I want to show you how I go ahead and take something from a sketch that is very refined from my thumbnails. Well, backing up a little bit. So thumbnails are then explored further. What I'll do is I'll create a larger sketch version of that. And then I'll refine that sketch as often as needed, or as much as is needed, and get it down to the forms that I want to work with. Really something that's as close as possible to the final artwork that I will create when I take it into the computer. So I'll do that usually with pencil, and I will draw out, and what we'll do is we'll look at this here. So I have my sketch template on one layer here. So typically I'll start with just the sketch on one layer, on a template layer. And what I'll do is I'll double click that. And when I double click, it allows me to treat this as a template. Now you can click here, template, but I don't normally do that. I just lock everything down and dim my images, my scans that I've done of my sketch. I'll just dim it down. So for right now, I'm just going to take it up to 100% and show you what I've got here. So I got some notations here. I enlarge with sharper segments. These little things here, the line segments, and then possible point placement. So let's zoom in here, all right? So these little dots that you see on the curves, those are areas that I think would be good locations for the points that I'm going to place in Adobe Illustrator. It does switch a lot, or does change a lot. Once I get it into the computer and I start working with it, I see things that could be refined, things that don't really, quite work that well. It really just depends on the method that I'm using to create a shape. So this is a pencil sketch that I did on 8.5 by 11 paper, 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and then I placed it on this sketch template layer. Brought it in, double clicked on it after I imported this, and then I went ahead and dimmed my image down to about 25%. Okay, 25, 30%. You know what? Let's do 30% here. So I'm going to dim that down, and then I'm going to click lock. So this little lock here. And what that's done is it's gone ahead and created a dimmed down version of my sketch layer, and it's now locked. The reason I lock it is I don't want to be selecting that when I'm going over my artwork. The next thing that I do is I create a layer above that. So in this case, I just created a layer 5 by clicking down here below, create new layer. So I've gone down in my layers panel, selected create new layer. It gave me a new layer. The very first thing I do is I name it. So I'm going to name this with cap letters so that we can tell the difference between the one that I already did, that's hidden right now, and this new one that we're going to be working on. The next thing I do is, rather than just working with a black line, which on a sketch like this could kind of get confusing, could get a little bit lost, I try to do all of my path work and my point work with a rule or a colored stroke here, because it's totally different from black. All right, and what I do is I either make it a neon color or kind of magenta here, because that's a color that I rarely ever use. So what I do is I get my pen tool and I go up to where the stroke is, and I make it about 0.5. So that's going to take the path and it's going to make it the thickness at 0.5. So I'm going to zoom in here. I'm zooming in by holding down Command and my space bar on the Mac. Okay, I believe it's the same Control space bar on a PC, but don't quote me on that. All right, so this right here is a half point path. We can see that when I select it, or up here we can see 0.5 on the width. And this is also just letting us know it's a stroke. There's my color. And if you don't know how to create colors, you can go into your swatches panel or your color panel, and you can select RGB by selecting this little sub menu. They always make the menus really nice and big so everyone can see them. That's a joke, of course. So if you hold down on that, go to RGB, you can select any of these colors. And you can see over there in the tools panel, the line or the stroke is changing. But what I'm going to do is I am going to click off of that, hit Command Z a few times, and I'm back to the original color. All right. So let me zoom back out. And I'm going to go over to my artwork now. All right. So we learned a little bit about creating 90-degree or 45-degree line segments, paths. In a previous lesson, we did that. And we also learned a little bit about making curves. This is obviously more complex. We don't have a lot of straight lines in this. And being that it's kind of a natural form, there really aren't any straight lines in nature. So we want to kind of just work off this as a guide, and we might make some adjustments to make it more organic as we're working on it. So I'm now on my points layer, and I am getting ready now to set all of my points. Now I'm going to do this very loosely, and it's going to look strange at first because we're not going to be making curves yet, and I'm going to show you how I work. So I'm going to start over here. And I'm going to look at my sketch and I'm going to click there. All right. So I got my first point set up. I'm going to come over here where I've drawn another point. Come up here where I've drawn another point. And you can see these, they're very faint, but essentially what I'm doing is I am just clicking on areas of the layout that are clearly where a change happens, such as right here. It's going to go from this arc here into this arc here. So when they meet up at a corner or a little point there, that's where I go ahead and place it. Now with curves, it's a little bit different. I will try to find the outermost point or part of the curve. So here on this curve up here, you can see that's where I decided to put the point. All right. So I have one here. I have one here. Here. Here's a little corner. It's the inside. And here is the outside there. There. Okay, so if we turn off our sketch over here temporarily, it doesn't look anything like it should, right? And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hold down my Command or Control key, and I'm just going to click off so we can look at the shape. Now we see the shape is made up of straight line segments. I didn't have to use any curves on any of this to create this. This was just really clicking around with my mouse, not holding down any keys, just clicking with the mouse to create these points. So let me select those again. So we can see. Now the goal is to create as few points as possible. All right. A lot of people will do this. Let me show you here. They will create, we're going to create a new layer temporarily. They will get their pen tool and they'll do this. Okay. I can barely see this because it's light blue. Let me see. Let me change that temporarily. Double click on that layer. We're going to go ahead and switch that to just a darker blue. just so I can see. So I change the layer key color here just while we're working on things to this darker blue. Okay, good. So yeah, people will come through. Whoops. All right, delete. Let me pick that up again. They'll come through and just, oh, we gotta do this, you know, and let's see this curve. And I'm gonna go around and select everything, or click on everything and get that curve really nice and perfect. Because, you know, let me just tell you, we'll stop. You will never get a very nice smooth curve by doing that. You'd have to set thousands of points to try to even get close to that. It's like trying to draw a perfect circle with a pencil. It's not going to happen, okay, unless you have tools. So what I want to do is I'm going to delete that layer because we just saw the incorrect way, and I'm going to go back to this. All right, so we have this basic shape made up of just clicking around, and I am now going to make some curves. Now, Illustrator has come a long way over the years, and CC 2018 that I'm using here, it has a lot of great features to help you create curves. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to remember the best that I can how to create the curves the old way, not using any of the new tools, parts of the tools. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to use my direct selection tool up here at the top in my tool panel. I'm going to drag with my mouse, holding down the mouse and drag over, and that's going to select all the points. These little circles that you see, those are features that we will not be using. Those are to round off these corners. That's not what we're going to be doing. So disregard these little circles as we work. Just let's pay attention to the paths and the points. All right, so moving right along here, I am going to go ahead and work on the curves. Now, if you recall in an earlier lesson when we just looked at basic curves, we went to the pen tool and down to the anchor point tool. And I can clearly see that I have a curve here. This is a pretty major one. So what we're going to do is deal with that one first. So I'm going to put my mouse over top of that center point on that curve. And I am going to hold down my mouse button and I am going to drag out the curve. And you can kind of see here it's got a helper thing. Again, other versions of Illustrator may not have this. In fact, I know they don't. But if you do have the ability to see it, it's great for that. So it may work for you, just depending on what version you're using. Let me back up a little bit here. If you pull out, but you go in the other direction, you'll see it's creating this loop kind of thing. A lot of people get confused and they think they're doing it wrong, and you're just going in the wrong direction, so you want to come back around. And now we're back and we got this nice curve. And you see what I'm doing here? I'm just moving real nicely around real slow, okay? With my mouse, just kind of undulating here. Just by rotating my mouse, I'm getting this kind of funky thing going on. A little animation. Okay, so back to where we are. I've dragged out. I don't have to hold down any keys. I'm just dragging out to try to follow that curve as best I can. When I let go, I have a nice curve here. Now these are drawn in my sketch as straight lines, straight paths, so we're just going to leave that. We're going to go around to the next one here. Same thing. Again, if I drag that way, I'm getting this weird loop. So we want to make sure we drag out. I'm not holding down any keys. I'm just trying to get that curve right. All right? All right, so let's move right along here. Coming around here. Now this one's going to be a little bit trickier. All right. There we go. We got that first curve. What I'm doing is I'm pulling down this handle away from the anchor. I am pulling this handle down. I'm going down and I'm just trying to match this bottom curve. I'm not real concerned with what's going on up here yet. We're going to deal with that in just a second. In fact, the best way to do that is to go back to the pen tool grab our standard pen tool. And you see how this is coming in here like this? Well, one way to deal with that is to create another point. So we can click and then go back over here to our anchor point tool, and we can kind of pull that handle away. Now we're not seeing a whole lot of change here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my direct selection tool again. I'm going to directly select that part and I'm going to drag it into position here. All right, so we have this curve here. It's not exact, but if we turn off our sketch here by toggling this off and on, you can see it's pretty clean. It's pretty good. All right, so we're going to leave all this alone here, even though they are curved. We're going to leave them alone. And just like I showed you, we're going to go ahead and add another part to this curve here. So we're going to click a center point. We're going to add another center point or another point here on this path. So now we have a path, point, path, whereas before we just had a point, a path, all the way over to this point. So we've added another point. Now you may not have seen this, but when you hover over top of a path, your icon for your tool, your pen tool, will change. You'll see a plus there. And that just lets you know that you are above the path and you're ready to set a new point on that path. If I come over to this one, it goes to a minus. So the one that I just set, I can click and it's gone. If I come back over, it allows me to add a point and it shows you again the plus symbol, minus, plus. All right, so just like we did before, I am going to go ahead over here. I'm going to grab this direct selection tool. I'm going to click on this point and it's going to be, just straight lines for right now, straight paths. I'm going to pull it out to the outermost point of this curve. Let go, and that's what I have. Going to come back into my pen tool, to the anchor point tool, also Shift C, and I'm going to drag this out, not holding down any keys, just dragging one of these handles. It's mirroring. The other handle is mirroring what's happening with the handle. So it's like a seesaw again. I'm going to drag that out, get it to where I want it, and let go. So I just showed you how to set the basic points all the way around, just loosely set them, and then how to tweak those things. Again, I've drawn them on the sketch and it was pretty close for the most part, but it will change just depending on the method that you're using for that. So just get in the habit of when you do a sketch, maybe place very light points on your sketch. If it's not too much trouble, do that and it'll train you to kind of see where you're going to be setting points so that you can modify them with Bézier curves. In the next lesson, I know this was a very long lesson, but in the next lesson, I'm going to show you, kind of speed forward and show you what the end result of this is. Again, we're working with a very organic shape. If you have something that's largely geometric, made up of straight edges or straight paths and points, you won't have to, sometimes you won't even have to use curves at all. So we'll look at that next. We'll speed up and kind of walk through this a little bit more, and I'll go very quickly through it.